from what I was shown, is in 1972. And I know you're going in order, but I'm only here rarely, so I think Prabhupada will not be unpleased or angry if I jump a little to 1974 and 1975, where there are some specific Leelamrita pastimes that I have some first-hand knowledge of. So what I'm going to share today is a supplement to the Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. Just so you know the process for writing the Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, the BBT created a team of about 7 devotees that traveled around the world interviewing Prabhupada disciples for their memories. If every memory had been published, it would not have been 7 volumes. It would have been 700 volumes. So Satsarup Maharaj had a very difficult task of taking all those memories and deciding which ones to put into the Leelamrita. Difficult task. Prabhupada's glories are unlimited. You have read recently in the Srimad Bhagavatam, very interesting statement in the purport that Prabhupada wrote. He asked, is it possible for anyone to count the number of atomic particles, atoms, in this world? Not possible. But even if you could count to that number, the qualities of Krishna are even a greater number. If you think about that for a moment, you will realize what teeny brains we have. But what will happen when our Krishna consciousness is awakened? The difference between what we can get into our brain now and what we will have in our consciousness when we are fully Krishna conscious, I can't even compare it. Yesterday I was comparing an ant to a human. This is even more of a gulf. So that is what is waiting for all of us, going from our teeny human brain to Krishna conscious, to consciousness of Krishna. So at that time, when we know the glories and opulences and qualities of Krishna, we may also know the glories and opulences and different qualities of his devotees. So naturally, 7 volumes is just like the water in the hoof print of a calf compared to the ocean, okay? So anyway, what I'm going to tell you today is supplemental to what was published. Hare Krishna. And to help me tell you this, I brought one of my unpublished diaries, which I have never read from before today. So this is the first time ever that I'm reading from this to share it with you. So let me just try to set the stage or paint a picture for you. Srila Prabhupada came to this world to deliver the Vedas to everyone on this earthly planet. Everyone, in every town and in every village, outside of India, in India, everywhere. He's an avatar who descended with this mission. And for the first 7 years of the Hare Krishna movement in America, in the Western world, that's 66, well, it began 65, but that's 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, most of 72. The process for spreading Krishna consciousness was through the Harinam Sankirtan. We talked about this for those who were there last night. The devotees in each temple were going out having kirtans in the public marketplaces and the public streets and some of the most famous streets in the world. They were marching and having kirtan 7, 8, 9, 10 hours every day, except Sunday, because in ISKCON, Sunday was the Sunday feast, love feast. So that was the ISKCON culture for 7 years. In the last year, in 1972, Srila Prabhupada created the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. Before that, there was some little publishing, not much, called ISKCON Press in New York. But in 1972, he created the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust in Los Angeles to handle the publishing and the selling of all of his books yet to come. At the time the BBT was established, we had the abridged Bhagavad Gita. Well, I'll go in order. We had Easy Journey to Other Planets. We had, of course, Srimad Bhagavatam, the first canto in 3 volumes, 1972. And we had Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto in 2 volumes. We had the summary study of the 10th canto, the Krishna books, in 2 volumes. We had the summary study of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, called The Nectar of Devotion. Those were our books. And later in 1972, the Macmillan Company, not the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, published the complete unabridged Bhagavad Gita as it is. So Prabhupada starts the BBT, and there are 4 people in the BBT. Then, of course, there's all the devotees working in it. But there were 3 trustees, Srila Prabhupada, a devotee named Karandar Prabhu, a devotee named Balimardan Prabhu. Those were the trustees. And there was one assistant or secretary, and that was this lowly self, Rāmeśvara. So we were named in the original document, and that was 1972. And then at the end of 1972, in December, the temple in New Dwarka, Los Angeles, it wasn't planned, but it happened, had a book distribution Christmas marathon for 3 days. Now, up until that marathon, no one knew how to sell books. The system was, you take a book and you bring it to the bookstore and ask them to please carry it and sell it for us. That was the system for selling books. And for Back to Godhead magazine, the system was to take it with Harinam on those 10-hour Harinam parties and try to give it to someone for 20. A devotee named Gargamuni, you've heard that name. He had started a incense company called Spiritual Sky Incense. So the devotees would take out these packets of Spiritual Sky Incense and try to give it to someone, get a donation, and then give them the magazine. And in this way, the whole worldwide movement was hardly selling any books, and for Back to Godhead, maybe the whole world between 5,000 and 10,000 magazines each month. That was our book distribution. So what happened in December of 1972 is for 3 days, the devotees in Los Angeles Temple went out on book distribution and had a marathon, which coincided with Christmas holidays in America. And at the end of those 3 days, those devotees in that one temple had sold 18,000 books in 3 days. Books and mostly magazines. 3 days. And the Hare Krishna movement was never the same after that. Never the same. The whole culture of Sankirtan changed from every devotee in the temple being on the Harinam party to gradually 1973 and 1974, devotees were now going out on book distribution and learning the art of going up to people and selling our books, not just magazines. In 2 years, that whole culture from the prior 7 years had changed. Now, Śrīla Prabhupada I think I mentioned this yesterday, had stopped translating the third canto in 1969 to write the Krishna books and then to write Nectar of Devotion. And then he went back to finishing the third canto in 1970 and 71. And then he finished the fourth canto in 1972. And then, sometime in 1973, he started writing 17 volumes of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And he finished writing 17 volumes in 1 year. An author may spend many years to write just one book. Some authors, a lifetime to write just one book. And Śrīla Prabhupada wrote the 17 volumes of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in 1 year. Amazing, amazing. This is superhuman. This is not human. This is not earthly. This is beyond anything on earth. So, the process for printing these books, third canto, 4 volumes, fourth canto, I think also 4 volumes, something like that. Each book, it was taking our ISKCON press 4 months to come out with one book. You may ask why. Why was it taking so long? Well, for one thing, we had started careful indexing of each book, and that took a lot of time. We had a Sanskrit department that was carefully putting in the correct Devanagari script and the word synonyms, and that was taking some time. The tape would come from Prabhupada wherever he was in the world, and it would be mailed. And in 1972 and 3 and 4, the mail system was not like UPS or FedEx, or I don't know what the equivalent is in India. It was just regular mail. So just to get the tape from Srila Prabhupada could take 2, 3, 4 weeks, depending on what country he was in. If he was in Africa, 4 weeks. If he was in India, 3 weeks. And some parts of America, 2 weeks. That was the mail system. So the tape would come, and they would type it out. And they would give it to the artists, and they would look through it and try to find 7 really nice descriptions or scenes or pastimes that would be not just suitable, but would be wonderful to have as a painting. So then they would do a sketch, which would show the composition. And they would have questions. I mean, after all, if you think of what is in the 3rd canto and the 4th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? We are talking about conversations amongst devas, or the priests, Brahmins of the devas, or pastimes that happen on places other than the earth. And the devotees have no idea what these places look like and what these personalities look like. So they have many questions. Old, young, beard, shape, they had a million questions. And they would write the letter to Prabhupada with these questions. 2 weeks. It would reach Prabhupada. Now, when Srila Prabhupada got a letter from the BBT, especially from his artists, the traveling secretary would immediately read it to Prabhupada. Here are the questions. Now, one thing you should know about Srila Prabhupada. Well, there's many things you should know about Srila Prabhupada. But this is one of my favorite things to tell you about Srila Prabhupada. One of my favorite things. If any other person in the world was getting these letters, anyone else in the world, I don't care, in any sampradaya even, great spiritual masters, I think, but especially scholars, they would take some time, go to some books, look, research, see what different people say, different acharyas and commentators say, and then write back the answers. That would be normal. After all, there's a question, what is life like on Indralok, or on Brahmalok, or on Martyalok, or in this lok, or that lok? And if you've not been there, if you've never been to those places, before you give an answer, you would want to do a little research. Not Srila Prabhupada. Instantly, they would read the question, instantly, all knowledge, all knowing, all Vedic knowledge was in him, and he would be able to give the answer perfectly. What does an airplane look like that the devas use? What does anything look like in this universe or in the Vaikuntha worlds? Prabhupada never had to look it up. How is that possible? That one personality could just have all knowledge in him, that he could give answers to every question about the universe and beyond. There's no person in the world that could do this besides Srila Prabhupada. You need to know this about Prabhupada. Immediately, he knew, and Krishna would speak to him in case he didn't, somehow or other, perfect answers. Imperfect questions, perfect answers, we like to say. So, how it would take 3 to 4 months for each book to come out. It's very easy to understand this. And the BBT was, in the beginning, divided between Los Angeles and New York. New York was doing the production, and Los Angeles was doing the publishing, warehousing, and sales and marketing. So, just to speed up the story, in 1973, at the end of 1973, my mentor, Kṛṣṇa, one of the trustees, took a leave of absence. He was also the GBC for the Western Zone. So that was a big shock. And Prabhupada was in Hawaii when it happened, and he called for Jayatirtha and myself to fly to Hawaii and discuss how will things go on. And Prabhupada decided Jayatirtha will handle the zonal work that Kṛṣṇa was doing, and I would handle the BBT work because I was the only one that was assisting Kṛṣṇa there. I was the only one that knew what he was doing for publishing. So that was at the end of 73. And at the end of 1974, the other trustee, Bali Mardan, took a leave of absence. And now there was no trustee watching over the production, the editing, the artists, the composing, the photography, the whole process of ISKCON Press became, in one sense, headless. So that was another shock. So Śrīla Prabhupada asked if I could somehow do it. And I said, Prabhupada, I don't think it's a good idea, but if you want me to do it, I can't do it from Los Angeles. You can't have me doing my Los Angeles work and my New York work. It all has to be in one place. And Prabhupada always had this idea to have it in one place. So he was in Dallas when we were having this conversation. He made me fly to Dallas, and then from Dallas he said, let's discuss it with the press devotees. Let's ask if they would be willing to move to Los Angeles. And so Śrīla Prabhupada and I flew together from Dallas to New York. And there were some very interesting conversations we had at the Dallas airport while we were waiting for the flight. I'll just share one of them with you. So this is 1974. And we have this amazing war, a Vietnam War, just beginning to come to an end. And Prabhupada liked to speak about, sometimes he'd like to speak about world events or histories, but from the eyes of how Krishna saw it, not how mundane people saw it. When Prabhupada spoke, you were getting God's idea, God's vision, how God sees things, how Krishna sees things. It was quite different from anyone else's speculations and thoughts. Even the deepest philosophers, it's just their own thoughts. Prabhupada, here are Krishna's thoughts. That's something you should know about Śrīla Prabhupada. So that when he writes about anything, that's letting you know how Krishna sees the universe, not how some ordinary person sees, or even a deva sees. How does Krishna see the universe? We get to see that angle of vision from Prabhupada's books. You won't get this from anyone else, from any other book. How amazing is our Śrīla Prabhupada? It's amazing. So we flew to New York, and Prabhupada asked the ISKCON press devotees if they would be willing. But of course, as you can imagine, anytime a devotee was asked something by Srila Prabhupada, it wasn't really in their mind a question that you could say yes or no to. It was, look at this, Prabhupada wants this, let's just do it. So naturally, about 30 or 40 devotees said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, whatever you want. You want us to move, uproot ourselves, leave our friends, devotees, bring our families to a place we've never been? Whatever you want. That was how the devotees were with Srila Prabhupada. So, after the press devotees said yes, Prabhupada said, okay, Prabhupada said, let us present the idea to our GBC at the upcoming Mayapur festival in March of 1975. Now, I flew there with Prabhupada, but no one told me that while they're working on the fourth canto, there are 17 books lying there that haven't been started yet. I had no idea. So, in the beginning of 1975, Volume 2 of the Adi Leela came out of ISKCON Press. They started with Volume 2. Because they started with Volume 2, when they finally got around to doing Volume 1, it's so big. Volume 1 is so big because they had made a mistake starting at the 7th chapter as Volume 2 instead of the 6th chapter. So anyway, the Adi Leela Volume 1 is very, very big. It's much more than 400 pages, which Prabhupada wanted. Anyway, and just around the time of the Mayapur festival, Adi Leela Volume 1 came out. So we had 2 volumes of the 17. That means there's 15 books not yet published, right? But meanwhile, Prabhupada had just finished. He went back to Srimad Bhagavatam. And at the end of 1974, beginning of 75, he finished the very difficult to translate, 5th, and write purports, 5th canto, Volume 1, 5th canto, Volume 2. Those were also lying there. So, at the Mayapur festival, Prabhupada said, okay, if we're going to move the ISKCON Press, if everything's going to be in Los Angeles, we have to make Rāmeśvara a trustee. So anyway, he made me a trustee at that festival. And in April, when I went back to Los Angeles, I knew if 40 devotees are coming, I need to house them. But also, I need a whole building for offices and Photoshop and art studios, and I had to find a building, knock down walls, and do all these things. So that was happening in April, and we were lucky it happened very fast. So that in May, we told the press, we're ready, everyone pack up, and they flew out to Los Angeles. And from the end of May to the middle of June, they set everything up. Now, ISKCON Press was in Los Angeles, ready to go. And Prabhupada, after the Mayapur festival, went to Australia, and he wrote me a letter from Australia that I am very unhappy. You get a letter from your spiritual master telling you that he's unhappy with you. This is like devastating. I'm very unhappy. There are 17 books that you haven't published. So I'm thinking, I didn't know about this. This is terrible news. And Prabhupada is blaming me on top. Of course, I'm now the trustee. Of course, I'm going to get the blame. And then I started thinking with the press devotees, what are we going to do? And I talked to Jayadvaita. I said, listen, we need more editing. So we need Hayagriva. He's a faster editor than Jayadvaita. Let me get Hayagriva and convince him to come to Los Angeles. And he agreed to come. in May and June, getting ready for Prabhupada's visit. And with Hayagriva and some extra things with the artists, we came up with a plan where we would have duplicate editing, duplicate production lines. We'd somehow get the questions answered faster for the artists. Somehow or other, we would end up changing it from one book every 4 months to one book a month. That's 4 times as fast. And we thought, this is amazing. Prabhupada's going to love this. So it's the middle of June, and Prabhupada is getting ready to come to Los Angeles to see the press. He's going to walk around and see everything. And I get a call from Prabhupada's secretary. Prabhupada is very, very angry with you. So I nearly died on the phone. I said, what did I do? What did I do? He said, you have 17 books that haven't been printed. He is so angry. He's calling for a special meeting in Los Angeles. I said, what do you mean a special meeting? He is ordering Kirtanananda, Brahmananda, Tamal Krishna, Vishnu John, Rupanuga, Satsarup, all these leaders. He's ordering them to fly to Los Angeles so to be there when he instructs you. So I was a little nervous. So Prabhupada arrives. He gives this famous arrival address, which is actually one of the most famous arrival addresses. If you have access to Prabhupada's, the tapes of all of his classes and lectures and conversations, you look up arrival address, Los Angeles, June 1975. You will hear one of the greatest arrival addresses of all time. Prabhupada explaining that the mission of the Hare Krishna movement is to publish and distribute books. That's just the most amazing. You will have chills if you hear this. So we're all there, and Prabhupada's giving this class, Arrival, and it's all about selling books and publishing books. It was incredible. And now the very next morning, we go on the morning walk, and the ISKCON press manager was Rādhā, and I'm there. And all these sannyasis are there, and GBC men are there. They're all at this morning walk. And so Prabhupada asked, so what is your plan? And I explained how we had this new plan. 4 times we're going to increase the production, 400%. We're going to come up with a book every month. And Prabhupada thought about it and said, okay, so that means it'll take you 17 months. And the way he said that, it like took my wonderful plan. The wonderful plan seemed like nothing, right? So here, I'm going to see if I can read some of this for you. Okay. So this is a section from this diary. Anyway, the fateful event took place the following morning of Prabhupada's arrival. We were on a morning walk at Venice Beach, and it was a wonderful morning walk. We were telling Prabhupada different stories and talking about different things going on in the material world, and it was very, very relishable, enlivening morning walk. And towards the end of the morning, and by the way, in one of the great mistakes of all time, the servant let the tape run out. And what happened next, which everyone in the world knows, it was never recorded. Such things were, we were simple devotees. The tape ran out. They didn't have a backup tape. And they didn't want to tape over what Prabhupada's morning walk was, because it really was a wonderful morning walk. So they just had no tape running. So anyway, that's why you can't find this tape about the 17 books. At the end of the morning walk, Prabhupada asked, without turning behind him, he was walking, but he asked, and how long will you work to produce the unpublished books? So I stepped forward, still a little behind Prabhupada, maybe to his side, and I said, Śrīla Prabhupada, we've been having meetings about it, and now that the press is finally here and installed, we think we can increase production 4 times. We think that now we can go from 1 book every 4 months, we can produce 1 of your books every month. And Radha Ballava and I were standing together. Tamal Krishna and Brahmananda were there. Prabhupada kept walking. And he said, 1 book every month. That means over 1 year. He said, it is not fast enough. Then he said, you must do all the books in 2 months. And he just kept walking. Everyone was looking at me and Radha Ballava. We were looking at each other. And we were sure Prabhupada didn't mean that. And we were sure he wasn't serious. So I began to speak again and said, Prabhupada, when you take into consideration the artists and the indexing and all the different things, I don't really think it's possible to do all the books in 2 months. But I think that it's definitely possible we could do, and I was now groping for some words. I wanted to please Prabhupada. I wanted him to be satisfied. I didn't want to just come back and say, no, we'll just do 1 book a month. But I really didn't believe we could do anything faster than that. So Prabhupada again stated, no, you must do all the books in 2 months. And it was at that moment that I realized that Prabhupada was serious. And Radha Ballava and I looked at each other in complete disbelief. We couldn't believe Prabhupada was asking us to do this. And I said, Prabhupada, I think it's impossible to do this. Then Prabhupada put his cane very firmly down in front of him and stopped walking. And then he turned and looked at me. And everybody froze. And very gravely, not with anger, but just very profoundly, looking very deeply, looking very serious, Prabhupada said, impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary. He's staring into me as he's saying this. And he looked right at me to see if I had faith in his words. And at that moment, I felt like I just had to surrender. Oh, there's one thing I left out of my diary, but I'll share with you. Just before I had this great realization that I have to accept this, And around him, like a circle, is Kirtananda, Tamal, Brahmananda, Vishnu John, Satsarup, Rupanu. They're all there, staring at me like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And then I also realized another thing about how they were looking at me. There were little smiles. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? But that little smile was, I am so glad this is not me. I could see they were all thinking that way. Every one of them, they were thinking. Good. Let Prabhupada put this on him, not on you. Yeah, I saw that right away. Okay, so at that moment, I felt like I just had to surrender. I had to throw away my material intelligence. I had to throw away everything that I was basing my estimations on, all my experiences, all my intelligence, all my rational common sense. I felt I had to throw it all away. Because if I kept holding on to common sense, I would keep thinking, it's impossible, it's impossible. And I can tell you all these years later, if you were to say to me now, can you do 17 books in 2 months, I would still tell you, it's impossible. Everything I know about the material energy, it's impossible to do this. So I had to throw that away. I was being asked to just surrender to Prabhupada, and I was just speechless, because when he said that impossible is a word in a fool's dictionary, I realized that if I don't believe Prabhupada, it means I don't believe in God. I don't believe in the power of God. If I don't believe what he's saying is true, and then Prabhupada just started walking on. And everyone scampered to catch up with him. And Radha Ballabha and I were trying to get our wits together. And what are we going to say next? Now, all the men walking with Prabhupada, including these big GBC, whenever Prabhupada says anything, all of his disciples naturally side with him and agree with him and follow him. So the whole mood on that morning walk, from that moment, it shifted. And everyone is then looking at us. Now they're turning back and looking, come on, you have to do it. You have to do it. Anyway, I'm going to skip reading this a little and just tell you that I just knew what I said. If I don't believe what Prabhupada just said, then I don't believe that there's a God. I don't believe in the power of God. I don't believe in it. Where's my faith? And when I had that moment of just surrender and accepting the order, regardless of any intelligence, common sense, just accepting it, a very amazing thing happened. This is like a little glimpse of what must happen when devas and different beings surrender to Krishna after doing some yajna, and they get powers how to create or how to do different things. So I'm a little tiny insect, and the idea of how to print 17 books in 2 months starts pouring into my brain from some outside source, not from me. They just ideas are now coming. And I'm speed talking to Radha Ballabha. We could do this, we could do that. He's getting caught up in it. Oh, yeah, we could do this. And all of a sudden, we're having this amazing conversation. Like the walk is going on, and we're just like we're like getting fed this energy. That's what happened. So rather than get into all the technical details of what we did, I will tell you that we caught up to Prabhupada, and we said, Srila Prabhupada, we can do it, but let us meet with ISKCON press devotees, and then we'll have some questions, and we need to meet with you tomorrow to discuss how we're going to do this. And Prabhupada said, all right. So Radha Ballabha and I jump in a car and rush back to the temple. We call a big meeting of the press devotees, and we just start telling them what just happened. And every one of them, of course, starts off by saying that's impossible. But we had already had our realization. So we start telling them how it's going to happen. And the same thing that happened to us starts happening to them. They start accepting Prabhupada's order. And all this energy and intelligence and ability, it just starts pouring into everyone. And you could see it. They're all sitting there and they're like being transformed into somebody else. Truly transformed. So then we synthesized all the comments into 3 requests. We had 3 requests of Srila Prabhupada. Request number 1. We said, Prabhupada, our men have spent years learning Sanskrit. In the last few months, they came out with volume 1 and 2, Adi Leela. They just started learning Bengali. They don't know it. They use dictionaries. They don't know what they're doing. We need you to stay in Los Angeles for the next 2 or 3 weeks. They're going to come every single day with their Bengali questions, which you can train them in Bengali editing. Prabhupada said, okay, he accepted that. He stayed 2 weeks. We wanted 3, he stayed 2 weeks. The next request was, Prabhupada, we don't have enough talented devotees. We need to be able to, with your blessing, write a letter to every temple in the world explaining what you just ordered us to do and asking for help. If anyone knows how to do typing or any other skill that we think could be valuable, we want those temples to loan those devotees to the BBT for 2 months. Prabhupada said, yes, you can write such a letter. We wrote that letter, and we started getting famous devotees, Palika, Ragatmika, all these great devotees just started from wherever they were in the world flying into LA for 2 months to help. And then the third request was the one that bothered Prabhupada the most. But there was no way around it. I said, Prabhupada, we can't use the mail. The mail is what's killing this. We're going to get the artist questions, book by book, and wherever you are, if you're in Los Angeles, I'm coming right up to your room with those questions. And when you leave, I am calling your servant and your secretary, and I'm making them write down the questions. They're going to run into your quarters, and then they're going to call me back with the answers, and we're going to be spending money on the telephone. And Prabhupada did not like that. But he agreed. I saved 4 weeks of mail back and forth by that one request being approved by Prabhupada. 4 weeks turned into a half a day. So then the marathon started. So Radha Ballabha and I locked ourselves in a room in a Charitamrita. So we had 15 volumes. So some of them had already been typed out, and some of them hadn't. So for the next 2 days, we made sure that everything was typed out. We had our army of typists typing Prabhupada's tapes. And Radha Ballabha and I lock ourselves in the room, and we're just reading every page of the 15 volumes in 2 days. Like we're madmen. And trying to figure out what should be the paintings. I wasn't going to leave it up to the artist. I didn't have time for them to read the text or the manuscripts. It had to be me telling them, here's what you're painting. And then I realized that this is 500 years ago. Many of these Leelas are historic. And if I sent a photographer to India on an insane mission to go all over India, South India, Jagannath Puri, Vrindavan, everywhere, and just take pictures of where Lord Chaitanya was and where Lord Nityananda and Advaita, everything, send them back to me, and I won't know if they just send me film what's what. I won't know what any of these places are. So we invented a secret code. And I called Bhargava in and said, Bhargava, listen, you have to do this. The way we're all surrendering, you have to do this. We're sending you to India, and you have to photograph all of India in a month. And you got to get me back these photographs with our secret code telling me what each one is, so we can add the photographs to the books. And he did it. And so for the next 2 months, I can tell you that the devotees average 2 hours sleep, if at most. Sometimes no sleep, sometimes maybe 2 hours sleep. That's how dedicated they were to this order. And I'm just going to read you one more section. All right, I'll read you 2 more sections. And by the way, the Los Angeles temple, Jayatirtha was the GBC, but the temple president was a devotee named Tulsi Das. And when we told him what we were going to be doing, the same infectious excitement went right into him. And he just said, what can I do to help? And I said, well, I'll tell you. I need devotees to come to every pressed devotee and do their laundry. I need other devotees to come to every pressed devotees and bring them food and clean it up. And I just started thinking of these very basic things to keep them alive. And I said, they can't stop to go to the prasadam hall. They can't buy toiletries. They can't clean their own dhoti, sari, even their underwear. I need the temple to do everything. And he said, okay. And the whole Los Angeles temple was now organized around this BBT marathon of doing the wash and cooking and cleaning and buying toothpaste, whatever the devotees needed. And they were delirious, you know, after weeks and weeks of no sleep. You know, they weren't grouchy. They were just euphoric. So that, as I wrote in my diary, we were becoming like little children. We were losing our grip on the body and on time. Sometimes we would just laugh for hours. I mean, when you're that tired and hungry and you're working, you don't stop working, you just start laughing. And it became contagious. Every night, the press devotees around 2 or 3 in the morning you would hear hysterical laughter coming out of ISKCON press. And this was going on for weeks. There were times when we were writing captions for the paintings. We were so tired. It was 2, 3 in the morning. I would ask Rādhā-Rāsavihārī, what book is this for? We were delirious. And we'd look at our notes, try to figure out what book it is. And Rādhā-Rāsavihārī would say, wait a minute. That book has already been printed. This was craziness. We were getting crazy like that. All right, so I just want to read you one more really nice section. For 8 weeks, the devotees just gave up eating and sleeping. At the most, 2 or 3 hours sleep, at the most. And sometimes there was not even an opportunity for that. So Rādhā-Rāsavihārī and I, we are at the airport. This is like week 5 or week 6. There's a whole section in here on how we arranged with the printer to stop everything. It's a big deal to set up a press for one book. Well, we were going to give them 17 books in 2 months. They got to like reserve all their printing presses just for us, because they were going to be getting 8 books a month. And then trainloads of paper had to be bought. I mean, it was this was another part of the marathon that nobody knows about, but everything was being organized like at supersonic speed, somehow or other. So now Rādhā-Rāsavihārī and I are at the airport. We picked up the books. We rushed back to the temple. This is the first 5 books from the 17. Had come out at one time. Week number 5. We rushed back to the temple. So now it's like around 3:30 in the morning. And we put them on the altar of each of the 3 altars. All 5 books on 3 altars. To offer them to the deities. And at Mangalarti, nobody knew what was going on, except the doors opened, and they were surprised. No one knew what was going on, and they were surprised to see Rādhā-Rāsavihārī and I in the temple for Mangalarti. That was the surprise. What are they doing here? Because we worked straight through. So why are they here? Then the doors opened. And the whole temple room, was stunned. Hundreds and hundreds of devotees. They were just staring at these 5 new books. Prabhupada had just left a week ago. So the miracle that was taking place hit everybody all at once. It just struck everyone that it is actually going to happen. And the whole temple room, all the devotees, were having the most ecstatic kirtan. The women were screaming, crying. People were grown-up men and women were just crying, hysterical. They were sobbing and crying. They were just so overwhelmed with emotion. Seeing these 5 books on the altar and just being part of the miracle. This was the mood during the entire 8 weeks. If you look through these volumes of Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll find each volume had between 8 and 11 new paintings, 4 to 7 pages of color photographs. If you add it up, you will realize that our art department painted be interesting for someone to get the exact number. Someone could go through and just figure out how many. So, at the beginning of the marathon, I always thought the problem was going to be the artists. How are they going to do this? And we had artists flying in from around the world, but one day, one of our Harinam parties was at the beach, and they found this very nice devotee from a person. He wasn't a devotee. Very nice person from Latin America. You know, he had his shoes off, walking around barefoot in the sand of the beach. His name was Hector. This is just one of many stories of how this marathon happened. And they brought him back to the temple because he, you know, they're preaching to him and he's interested in spiritual life and yoga. And he mentioned to someone, what do you do? Oh, I'm an artist. So that devotee ran up to me and said, hey, we found some artists on the beach, barefoot. And it did, you know, I go, of course I'll meet them, because what else could happen? You know, what else, whatever Krishna sends. This person, Hector, had an ability. He couldn't do anatomy, he couldn't do people, but he was a landscape artist. And he was like an artist that you see on having a TV show where they could do a painting in a half an hour. He had the ability to do trees and oceans and mountains and leaves and anything to do with landscape. He could do it in less than one day. And I didn't believe it when he starts telling me what he does, and I brought him over to the press, and I had him do some landscape, and all the artists, Bhadraj, Parikit, Murlaraj, they're all watching, and we're all thinking the same thing. Okay, we're going back to what we did during the Krishna book. We're going to have an assembly line. Once we picked the painting, we had a committee of 4 top artists. They would plan together, not individually, the composition, that was one sketch. The highlights, the lights and the darks that show the depths, the depth, that would be the second sketch. And then the exact colors, that would be the third sketch. So for every painting, they had to do 3 sketches. And I didn't have time to send it to Prabhupada because we were making phone calls, so I had to approve these sketches, and I didn't know anything about art. I mean, the press had just come to Los Angeles a month earlier, right? And then, now Krishna's letting me learn about art and approving the sketches. So no one was allowed to go on the canvas until the sketches were done and approved. And then whatever background and landscape, that would go right to Hector. And he'd have the sketches and he'd paint it all in, and then the artist would come back and paint in Lord Chaitanya or whoever had to be painted in. And the artist would paint until they dropped. So you'd see artists unconscious at the easels, like at 1, 2 in the morning, right? And I'd then sneak in and take the painting. If there was one artist that was still awake, I'd bring that painting over, finish this now, and then I bring it back. So the artist would wake up, and the figure that they had started had been painted in, and they couldn't figure out how that was happening. One artist figured it out. This is the last story I'll tell. Parikit, very wonderful, amazing artist, but one day, about 5, 6 weeks, he just couldn't take it that I was doing this, taking his painting and making someone else paint the face and bring it. He couldn't believe that I was doing that to him. So I'm in my office, the BBT office, Rādhā-Vallabha sitting at a desk. My feet are up on the desk, Rādhā-Vallabha sitting in the chair, and we're talking about capture, whatever we were talking. It's like 3, 4 in the morning. Parikit had woken up and found his painting had been painted. He comes to the door. Now, Parikita is a very strong-bodied devotee, very powerful. I'm a pretty small devotee. And he's at the door, like, I love him, but it was like Aristosaur. I mean, the eyes were red. There was smoke coming out of his nose, and he is staring at me with his fists. And then, it's a small office. From the door to my chair, he charges as fast, a full run. He charges at me. And I'm watching this, and for me, it's like in slow motion. And I'm just sitting there, like, waiting for whatever's going to happen next. And just as he got to me, something happens. He falls straight down like a rod. And he's holding onto my feet. And he's crying that I should forgive him. So I got him to stand up, and we were both crying like babies, just crying and hugging each other. And when we finally were able to stop our emotions, I said, okay, go back to work. So these are the little stories that you won't read about in the Lilamrita of how this marathon happened. So we have to stop there. One day this book will be published. You'll find many. Hare Krishna. This all Prabhupada, all the energy, the divine energy, everything that came into us, nothing to do with us. No credit goes to us. None. It's all Prabhupada. And Krishna acting through Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.